Hey, what's up, everybody? My name is Jeremy Schumacher. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm the Jer in Wellness with Jer. Thanks for stopping by and checking out my channel. We're back with another show review. I had some time. I was ill recently, so I had some time to watch TV. I finally got to track down and watch Mike Flanagan's Fall of the House of Usher, which is kind of his homage to Edgar Allan Poe and a bit of an amalgamation of Poe stories told with a modern retelling. So we're going to talk about some of the mental health concepts in that and kind of get my thoughts on the show and review. It is on Netflix. You can check it out. I did a Mike Flanagan show already. I reviewed Midnight Mass, which you can check out on the YouTube channel. It has a lot of themes of religious trauma. This Fall of House of Usher also has some religious stuff in it, but I'm not going to spend a ton of time on that today because I feel like we already did it. Go watch the Midnight Mass review. Go watch Midnight Mass. Spoiler alert. When I do reviews, I'm not careful about spoilers. I watched the show, so I'm going to talk about the show. If you want to watch the show first, feel free. It's been out for a couple months. I missed when it was a bit of a cultural phenomenon for a minute. So yeah, Mike Flanagan is a horror guy. He likes to have kind of this cast of characters he uses regularly. So I would say, Zach Gilford, Katie Siegel, Samantha Sloyan, Carla Gugino, who's phenomenal in Fall of House of Usher. Kind of the cast of characters Mike Flanagan likes to use in his shows, with the addition of the one, the only Mark Hamill, who's Luke Skywalker, who's Joker in Batman the Animated Series. Dogs just ran out to bark at stuff. The joy of recording at home. So yeah, the regular cast of characters, I would say one of the things with how I consume media is I often find an artist that I like, and I'll watch all their stuff. So if I find a director that I like, I'll watch a lot of their movies. If I find a musical artist I like, and that's just kind of, I'll listen to all their stuff. And that's just kind of how my ADHD brain works. It tends to binge things. So when streaming services came out, I really liked Netflix. I like to be able to watch a whole show at my pace. Honestly, even when I do like continuing ed credits for my professional life, I like to do self-studies where I can learn at my own pace, kind of go through things at my own tempo, because I binge stuff with my hyper focus. So I like that Mike Flanagan using the same cast of characters is distracting when you're binging stuff. So it's hard to see like Samantha Sloyan, who plays Beth, who's like the big bad villain. She's not the big bad. She's the personal worst, in my opinion, from Midnight Mass. Seeing her as a different character was like just difficult, and nothing about the actor. This is probably just me saying that's one of the downfalls of using a regular cast of characters, I would say. But yeah, so the show really works, I think, as a homage, as a love letter to Edgar Allan Poe, a modern retelling of a bunch of different Poe stories, loosely based on Poe's works. The episodes are kind of named after Poe short stories. So and Fall of House of Usher is a Poe story as well. So the whole thing is kind of a nod to Edgar Allan Poe, saying, if you like this stuff, go read the original's work. And I think the show really works as that. I think looking at the show as much more than that is, it's not. And some of this is horror, maybe as a newbie to the genre. I'm not always up on all the ins and outs of horror and what is nodding to and what it's getting at. But I think the show's kind of cathartic in, let's watch bad things happen to bad people, and that's fun, right? Catharsis, as we understand it in the psychology world, is there is a relief from getting it out. It's what venting to your best friend is. It's what occasionally, going in and telling your therapist what happened in the past week. Although catharsis, we also know, has limited utility in that the more that we vent and the more that we rely on catharsis, the less we actually get from it. And so I think a show like this as a limited series works well. We couldn't have 4 seasons of this. It would have gotten boring. I would tend to argue that watching all of the members of the House of Usher die almost got a little stretched out. There could have cut an episode or 2 maybe and still had the same vibe and feel of the show overall. But yeah, I think as a literature nerd, my dogs are named after literature places. My tattoos are based on literature. So I think it's one of those things where like I like it a lot. I read Poe growing up. I was a weird little kid and the macabre and serial killers and all that stuff always interested me. So I've read a bunch of Poe. Both my parents are English teachers, so I just grew up reading Poe and Lord Byron, and my tattoo is based on Rime of the Ancient Mariner, which is a Coolidge, no, yeah, Coolidge poem, and I'm nerdy like that. So I like Edgar Allan Poe. A lot of the references to Poe's works I understood, and I caught them, little Easter eggs that are thrown in there. So again, I think as an homage, it works really well. I think commenting on the opiate crisis in America and elsewhere was, I don't know, this show wasn't subtle in any way, shape, or form. It's going to hit you over the head with what it's trying to say. And again, I think for catharsis that works, for like, wow, this show really changed the way that I viewed this thing. Like, I don't know, if you enjoyed the show, you're on board with like billionaires shouldn't exist. If you enjoyed the show, you're on board with like pharmaceuticals are evil, and healthcare for profit is bad, and when we put profit above people, bad things happen, and there's a lack of humanity to the people who are doing that. And so I don't think someone who's like a huge fanboy of well, I don't want to say that, we can talk about that. So quick synopsis of the show. Fall of the House of Usher is basically this family has a murder in the past, and the house therefore falls apart. In Edgar Allan Poe's Fall of the House of Usher, the house at the end of the story actually falls apart. Literally, the house falls apart. And so there's a bunch of different stuff in here in the show from Poe, from Castigo of Amontillado, Telltale Heart. Like a lot of that stuff is in here. So some fun horror stuff. Roderick Usher and Madeline Usher basically make a metaphorical, a literal deal with a metaphorical devil. It's almost Faustian in its approach to, if you're offered fame and then everyone from your house will suffer, are you going to take that? If you're offered being rich, not fame. And so they take the deal knowing that their family line will end with their kids. And so, then we see the kids being horrible people and the horrible deaths that they experience. And Roderick and Madeline are the last to die because they have to live through the deal they made. And so that's the thrust of the story. Each character, all of Usher's, Roderick's children, the children of Usher, are wealthy and doing a thing within the world. Kind of this idea that the Usher family thought they would change the world, but they're all just kind of awful people. And the ways in which they're changing the world aren't really making the world any better. And so I think that's kind of the theme of like, are these people who have undue influence in our society, these incredibly wealthy people, are they actually making the world better? Should Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos be going to Mars? Should we give them rockets? Should the US military pay Elon Musk for satellite link ups? Like, the answer is unequivocally no. These people are idiots, and we know that because we can see it in their personal lives. I'm not an Elon Musk fan. He's a good example of nepotism, someone who's born into wealth, that's ill-gotten. His parents owned like an emerald mine in apartheid South Africa. So like, not a good person who's getting his wealth from not a good place. And surprise, surprise, he doesn't use his wealth on good things. So the Boring Company that was basically just going to reinvent subways, waste of money. Tesla cutting corners. The microchip he's trying to get is killing chimpanzees left and right, which is a thing the show gets at. So there's some references to, I think, both Bezos and Elon Musk in the show, and highlighting that, like, right, they're bad people. If you think the Usher children are bad people, but you're a fan of Elon Musk, like, you're maybe missing the point of the story. And I do think sometimes that can happen, because I think in this gory, gratuitous violence, these cathartic things, people latch on to the wrong character. You see it with something like X-Men, which has always been about marginalized communities, whether that's about race, or it's about the AIDS epidemic, or it's about sexuality, gender, about these marginalized communities. X-Men is an extended allegory for that. But because X-Men is so loosely allegorical, it doesn't say this is about race. Some X-Men stories about race. Some of them are about the AIDS epidemic. Some of them are about just marginalized communities, LGBTQ plus communities. That people will watch and they think Wolverine is cool. Here's this guy who's got claws coming out and he takes on a helicopter. I'll go see that movie. And so sometimes people who are maybe supporting right-wing movements or authoritarian movements that are marginalizing these communities that X-Men is really about will latch on to a character because the allegory is so loose. I don't think that's the case with Fall of the House of Usher. It's, again, very blunt. It's going to hit you over the head with it. So I'm kind of going to run down things real quick. And the show, what I like about the show is that catharsis. Watching bad things happen to bad people is cathartic. I'll agree with that. That's what I grew up watching pro wrestling. I think about Stone Cold Steve Austin and the character of Mr. McMahon in the late 90s, the Attitude Era of the WWF, now WWE. Like, Stone Cold was not a good guy, but he'd come out and he got to hit his boss with a steel chair. And like, there's some catharsis for that. Seeing that on TV, seeing that guy who's not going to take shit from anyone go and beat his boss up in a wrestling ring is like, hey, that's cathartic. Seeing David beat Goliath, seeing that play out can be really cathartic for us in a way that we will not be able to do those things in our real life. But that's all it is, So Stone Cold hitting Vince McMahon in character didn't stop Vince McMahon from being a terrible person, and like really terrible, we know, with some recent things and allegations about Vince McMahon. But also, like, Stone Cold hitting his finishing move or using a steel chair to hit his boss didn't overturn capitalism. It didn't stop WWE from being this giant multimedia corporation that doesn't have employees, signs their wrestlers as independent contractors, and then won't pay for their health care after they're obviously injured or have CTE or all this stuff. So like, in story, that catharsis is nice, but in practice, the catharsis doesn't change anything. So I think that's maybe a criticism of the show as well. But so we have I'm going to run through the kids here. Perry, who's the youngest, is trying to figure out what he's going to do. He wants to open a group of nightclubs, and Roderick, the family patriarch, is really against it, as like, that's a bad use of money. That's not doing anything to change the world. And Roderick's wealth all comes from selling painkillers. So not a good thing, but he uses it as like, well, I'm taking pain away from people, so aren't I the good guy? And like, he knows he's not the good guy, but that's the story he tries to tell himself, and the narrative he puts onto his kids. And then there's all this trauma from unmet expectations and poor attachment. So if you want to look at one psychological concept that the show kind of gets right, I would say intergenerational trauma, and how that gets passed down, and how attachment styles look different. And this yearning to meet our parents' expectations, even if they're unrealistic, can really be a driving force for a lot of children. So Perry, again, is the youngest. Perry's one of the bastards. There's only two children who identify as kind of being like ushers in the fullest sense from Roderick's first marriage. Otherwise, they're all children who were out of wedlock. And so the kids even kind of have an in-group, out-group dynamic for how they handle which children are legitimate and which ones should be like the rightful heirs. So Perry's one of the bastards. He's going to go to a nightclub. He throws this underground party at a former Usher testing facility. A bunch of chemicals that weren't disposed of properly, which Roderick admits to. It's his fault. The chemicals were there. They're connected to the sprinkler system. The sprinkler system then sprays horrific acid all over everyone at the party. And so Carla Gugino is playing Verna, who's the devil in the story, the Faustian devil who makes a deal with the Ushers. And so she's there, and she's kind of the devil. She's the Grim Reaper of like calling to account the deal the Ushers made in killing all the children. So she's at the nightclub, and that's kind of our first introduction to her. Another character played by Mark Hamill is the Pim Reaper. What is his first name? I'm drawing a blank. I want to say Gordon, but that might not be right. Arthur Gordon Pym, which is a reference to another Poe short story about going around the world. Maybe it was not a short story, maybe it was a novel, a trip around the world, and then kind of like the horrors of finding nothing at the end of it. It was not a well-written story, but it gets into like the myth of the Hollow Earth and some of the other stuff. So Mark Hamill plays Arthur Gordon Pym, who's this lawyer, this bulldog of the way that the Ushers have avoided consequence for all these years is because Pym will dig up blackmail, will threaten people, will do all these things to protect the family. So we have Pym starts then on the course of being like, who's this Verna character? And the old accounts of Madeline and Roderick Usher are going to come to light then through that. The story is also told backwards, where Roderick Usher is sitting with Dupin, who's investigator who's investigated the family and never been able to land a conviction against them. And so Roderick is kind of coming to account with Dupin as well. So it's a fun, like, Tarantino, let's tell the story backwards kind of thing. So Perry dies in the acid shower, and Perry's kind of like debauchery defined. He's doing drugs, he's having orgies. That's all he cares about is Instagram followers and that type of thing. So again, a ham-fisted, I would say, in its lack of subtlety of like, right, if all you're chasing is fame and fortune through social media and getting drunk and getting laid, like, not great. And like, I don't know, I would say like, right, blatant hedonism is not a thing to be supported, just pleasure for the sake of pleasure. But like Epicureanism, maybe, for all you Greek nerds out there, this idea that like pleasure is meaningful, and that if we're looking at Earth, our time on Earth is limited, that like we should seek to maximize pleasure, not just not but like consciously, ethically, to maximize pleasure for other people as well, to engage in pleasure. So like enjoying a feast is a good thing. Having nice things in your life is a good thing, not like blatant consumerism, hedonism at like, I'm going to live in, bankruptcy because I don't know, I can't afford the nice things I have, and all I'm going to do is seek pleasure, and that's going to harm other people. Epicureanism is like a responsible pleasure seeking. So, but that's not what Perry is. So then Camille is the next child who's going to meet a horrific end. She is like a media mogul, so like TMZ is the analogy. One of the things that's interesting is the story. Like almost all the kids are bisexual or pansexual, I would say, and so it's interesting to see that representation all depicted in one family. And I would say, I talk about this in another video, like polyamory is having a moment right now in our mainstream culture. I talk about this a lot in therapy because I work with ethical non-monogamy, and people who are deconstructing religion will often then deconstruct other social norms and institutions like marriage or like monogamy. And I work with a lot with the LGBTQ community, which is less, I would say, based anecdotally on my case, so less beholden to social norms. And neurodivergent folks are also less beholden to social norms. So people moving outside of a monogamy or looking at it differently. Most of us, human beings, Homo sapiens, are not monogamous in the sense that we would look at other animals in the animal kingdom being monogamous. Voles are kind of the classic example of they will mate for life with one partner only. If that partner dies, they won't mate again. And so it's one of those things where that's how we talk about monogamy. Emperor penguins, I think, are another one. And that's not most humans. Most humans will have multiple partners over the course of their life. We're just serial monogamers, meaning one monogamous relationship back to back to back. It's kind of how we talk about monogamy, but that's not really what true monogamy is. True monogamy is one partner for life. And most of us don't do that. But, social norms would throw shade at polyamory, would throw shade at some of these other forms of relationship having. And I'm seeing things like having a polycule, being poly, being bi, being not hetero or homonormative, in that you only have one partner or that you're on the extreme ends of the spectrum. And I really see it with Gen Z and the younger generation kind of throwing the whole social norm out completely, which is a good thing. The social norm has been harmful to too many people and really marginalized a lot of communities. So another plus for the show is kind of, not that these are good characters, and I do think it leans so far into maybe being parody or highlighting the faults that can happen with some of these, going to use the phrase alternative lifestyles, not alternative in a judgment way, alternative to the social norm. And I think it's one of those things where, like, Perry's poly, Camille is for sure bi, Leo's bi, Vic's a lesbian, Tamerlane's a cuck queen. So like, all of the children have non heteronormative relationships, and so that's really interesting, I think, to see that depiction in a family in a show. But again, not necessarily a great depiction, but the more media representation that alternative lifestyles get, I think the better, from a term of like consenting adults. So Camille's awful. She's TMZ as a person. She abuses her assistants. They entered into a professional and sexual relationship with her, which is bad boundaries. And when they finally start to set some healthy boundaries, she throws a hissy fit and fires them. She's trying to find an informant within the family. Dupin, at one point, this is an important plot point, Dupin brings up in court that there's an informant that is working with the FBI, and so the family's looking for the informant, and so she's trying to get dirt because that's her whole thing as TMZ, the person. She's trying to find dirt on her siblings. She goes to investigate one of her siblings who does testing on animals, and a chimp gets out and mauls her to death, and it's very gory and brutal. And again, Verna is there as a security guard who lets her into the facility and confronts her, and so a very terrible death for her as well. And again, I think heavy-handed analogy of like, right, paparazzis, the TMZ, the celebrity culture in general, I would say, is unhealthy. Like the fact that we know what Kim Kardashian thinks about certain social things, or Aaron Rodgers is spouting off about vaccines when he's not a college graduate. Like our love of celebrities is not healthy for our society, and our celebrity worship is not healthy for society. And also the predatory nature in which entire media industries exist to just report on those is also gross and yucky. And so, yeah, just Camille's not a good character. Yeah, that's Camille. Leo's the next one. Leo is portrayed as a gay man who's also cheating in. So he's bisexual. Has cheating on his fiance. We assume cheating. It's not established that they have an open relationship, and he seems to be hiding it. He kicks a girl out who's giving him a blowjob. He kicks her out onto the porch. The balcony is high-rise New York apartment, and so. Yeah, that kind of comes back then because he kills his partner's cat in a drug-fueled rage, and then he replaces the cat because he doesn't want to admit to his partner that he killed the cat. And so it's this whole thing. The cat gets into the walls. That reminded me of kind of the H.P. Lovecraft Rats in the Walls story. Another horror author from the 1900s, although Poe was from the 1800s. So I'm just mixing my horror authors here. But yeah, so drugs are bad. Lying to your partner is bad. And Verna's there. Sometimes she helps him adopt this horrific devil cat. And then it seems it was all hallucination because the original cat that he thought he killed in this drug-fueled rage comes back at the end. But that might have been artistic. We're not sure how much that's based in reality, or that was just a nice cap to the episode. But he tries to kill the cat, falls off said balcony from earlier, and plummets to his death. And Pym's here. Arthur Gordon Pym, the Pym Reaper, the lawyer, is cleaning all this stuff up as the show goes on while trying to track down Verna. Let's see. Then there's Vic. Vic's the one who's doing the animal testing. She is working on a heart pump, basically, that can replace pacemakers and change the world. That becomes important because Roderick's heart is failing. And so he's very putting a lot of pressure on Vic for, hey, get this done, get this done, get this done. Vic is dating the doctor who's doing the surgeries, and she's taking shortcuts with the research. She's skewing the results. And so it's kind of a big pharma is gross and terrible, which is like already the message of the show because of the painkillers that the family made its wealth from, but also the perils and horrors of animal testing, that these are creatures who are alive and living horrible lives, caged up. I have a friend who has rats as pets, and like looking at that and knowing how much psychology has used rats for testing is like, ugh, Yeah, because like those are intelligent creatures that you build relationships. They're social. The reason we use them for testing is because their brains are somewhat similar to the human brain, and so yeah, again, that like heavy analogy, but I think like valid, just not subtle. That the show's like, hey, we should stop doing this. And so then the animal kingdom, through this one chimp that's been pumped full of adrenaline, rises up and kills Camille. Vic goes crazy. This is very much the Telltale Heart, where the story written by Poe is the main character goes crazy hearing the beating of the heart from the body that he buried under the floorboards. And so that's kind of Vic. She keeps hearing the heart pump that she created. She kills her partner somewhat accidentally, but somewhat in a fit of rage. Not that she was trying to kill her, but she gave into her rage, killed her, and then tries to cover it up. And so that's very horrific. That's a really gory episode. The whole show is pretty gory. If you don't like blood and viscera, not a good show for you. But that's a bit of a Flanagan thing. The director is known for that. And so again, kind of this horrific thing. As Roderick is talking to her, he starts hearing it as well. He hears the heart pump for her partner that she had killed, and then she stabs herself in the heart right in front of him. And so again, this very traumatic death, very gory, visceral death that Pym has to come in and clean up. Shout out to Mark Hamill. He's an awful character in the show, and also like just chewing up the scenery. Like you can't. He's a fun character to watch. He's very well acted. And then Tamerlane is maybe the one I'll spend the most time on. She's such a fascinating character because I don't think portrayed in media all that often. She's one of the OG children between Roderick and his first wife, and she's launching. The show not mentions Gwyneth Paltrow's Goop. Um, she's launching a wellness lifestyle, a subscription box in which you get wellness things, super overpriced and terrible, and all very like not scientific. And so she has this relationship with Bill, who's leads the Built Fitness, and he does like jazzercise videos, but is very famous for it. And so she married him and started this empire with him. And it comes out that like she had several fitness gurus to choose from. She picked him because he was the easiest to work with, and they have a really horrible marriage. She brings in sex workers on a regular basis to enact her marriage with Bill and have sex with him, and then she gets off on that. And so again, like cuckolding, I think, is a thing that gets mentioned a lot in pop culture as like on the right wing media stuff seems to all be very obsessed with it. And they talk about it as like a bad thing, like soy boy cuck is a thing they talk about, which is a cuckold is somebody who gets sexual pleasure from seeing their partner have sex with other men. A cuck queen then is a female who has sexual pleasure from seeing her partner have sex with other women. And so again, like it's not a good media portrayal. It's just interesting to see all these different kids have these different relationship dynamics in the show. So yeah, she goes crazy. She has Verna shows up as one of the sex workers to have sex with Bill, and then Tamerlane keeps seeing her in Bill's jazzercise videos, and she starts to lose her shit. She isn't sleeping, and not sleeping, using caffeine to stay awake. And so the launch of her fitness lifestyle, Gold Bug, then hits a snafu where she's basically hallucinating through the whole thing because she's so tired. And so, yeah, it's cringy to watch. She goes home, their apartment, their house, whatever it is, has mirrors everywhere, and she starts smashing all the mirrors because she keeps seeing the sex worker dressed up as herself because that's her fantasy with Bill. And so again, just like not how relationships go, not how like that ethical non-monogamy, cuckolds in hot wife, stag, vixen lifestyle type thing would work in real life, and how it goes wrong, but not how to do it healthily. So again, not like a thumbs up review of alternative relationship styles, kind of a like, this is how to do it poorly. But again, we're here for the catharsis and the gore of bad things happening to bad people. At this point, if you're still watching the show, like that's episode 6 or 7. And then we have the oldest child, which is Frederick. Frederick's awful. This is probably the hardest episode to watch, just like the true horror of his wife went to Perry's drug-fueled orgy in that first or second episode. Perry, the first child to have died, and so she's burned by the acid but survives. And then Frederick just loses his mind with his lack of trust for her. She didn't cheat on him. She just didn't tell him that she was going to go to this party. And so he's very untrusting of her, doesn't know what was going on, and gets like very possessive of it. He takes her out of the hospital, even with her body covered in third-degree burns. He just abuses her mentally and emotionally. He puts pictures of them up all over the room that she's in, and they have a child, and the child's really the only good character in the show. And she kind of calls him out on the poor treatment, and he lies to her about like specialists are coming and doing all these things. So it's really terrible. He's basically drugging his wife, and ends up accidentally drugging himself because he's doing cocaine throughout all of this that he got from Leo, who's one of the other brothers. And so it's just like a whole thing where it's kind of like, right, the house of cards is falling, all the dominoes are falling as the show progresses. And so he accidentally drugs himself, which is what he was giving his wife. And so he goes to destroy the building that he was supposed to destroy, that Perry had the drug-fueled orgy in, if you're following all the plot points here. And so he drugs himself with basically a paralytic, which he'd been giving to his wife. And so he then is paralyzed in the building as it is demolished. And so he dies, and Verna's there. And Verna kind of, I think, the devil character is right in this one, where she says, "You have been awful and have deserved this." And that's the one where the catharsis, I think, really hits, where it's like, right, she kind of just lays down next to him while he's paralyzed and watches this building come down on top of him. So then we're left with Frederick and Madeline, the patriarch and matriarch of the family. And finally, it's revealed that to have their drug empire, they killed sorry, I think I said Frederick there. Roderick and Madeline. Roderick killed his original boss to take over the company. They buried him alive behind a wall, and so Madeline tries to get him to commit suicide. Verna saves him, and they kind of have their eventual coming to terms where Verna kills them both. They both end up dying. Pym gets arrested. So like there's comeuppance for all the characters. And again, that's supposed to be very cathartic. But I think at the end of it all, it's just we're left with just that. It's just catharsis. In the real world, the Sackler family, which is behind the opiate crisis in America, will probably not be held to account. The rich people who are buying elections and buying Supreme Court justices that passed a toothless ethics standard will not be held to account. Maybe Donald Trump will keep getting sued by E. Jean Carroll and infinite money glitch and losing that because he doesn't understand defamation. And this is the first time he's being held to account. He's got 91 felony charges that should be guilty of most, if not all of them, because we watched them happen in real time. So again, like kind of this cultural point that we're at where like, do our systems of justice hold rich people accountable? And a bit of a mixed bag, like not really, but maybe we'll start doing that. It's one of those things where I think the show looks at it as personal justice. Bad people deserve bad things, good people deserve good things. And like that's not really the way that society works at all. Society has all these institutions, these systems in place. And so we look at institutional racism, we look at systemic injustice, we look at sexism and misogyny, we look at bigotry in the LGBTQ community, and picking on 0.1% of the population, or the 1% of the population that's trans or non-binary or gender non-conforming, and all the laws that have passed in the past year, picking on this tiny percentage of the population that society should be keeping safe. We should be keeping marginalized communities safe and uplifting them, and not using power to pick on them. And so the show doesn't really address the systems at play. It kind of looks at bad people deserve bad things. If you weren't bad, then bad things wouldn't happen to you. And like, that's not the way it works. Plenty of good people are born into poverty. Plenty of wonderful folks have to deal with homophobia, transphobia, misogyny, and we see nepotism continue to rise. And second, third generation Hollywood stars, how many Hollywood actors are through there in nepotism. Even Mike Flanagan's wife is Katie Siegel, who's a famous actress in her own right. I'm not saying she's just famous for marrying the director, but like even in their own show, we can look at it and say, like, well, are we understanding the systems at play here? Are we addressing morality through a systems lens, or are we just addressing it through this kind of, if you do something good will happen to you. If you do something bad will happen to you. That isn't realistic. And so I think the show, again, is a fun little romp. I compare it to like pro wrestling because I think it's catharsis based. It's simple storytelling meant to elicit an emotional response. It's not challenging you. It's not challenging society. And so not necessarily a ton to learn from it, but I think a fun little romp. I had a pretty nasty head cold where I was out and for a couple days. And so I lost my voice actually. And so it was nice to watch a show that I didn't have to think about or engage too much. I could have some NyQuil to sleep through the night and enjoy falling asleep to the show. So yeah, I recommend it for like the catharsis and the fun little romp. I don't recommend it as, if you don't like the gory stuff, if you can't handle that, not a good show to watch. It's not necessarily a great horror show. It's just gory. It's not a slow build or tension. And if you're a fan of Edgar Allan Poe, I'd check it out. It's a fun, modern update to his stories. So it's a fun little romp, not real thought-provoking or engaging beyond that. But like, if you're looking for that catharsis, let's watch bad things happen to bad people, then I would say check it out. And that is The Fall of the House of Usher on Netflix from director Mike Flanagan. So I'm Jeremy. Thanks for stopping by, checking out the channel. You can find more stuff over at wellnesswithjer.com. I'm also on Instagram at wellnesswithjer, and I have a podcast, which is Your Therapist Needs Therapy, where I talk to other therapists about mental health. So thanks for stopping by, checking out the channel. Like, subscribe, do those YouTube things. Check out our merch. We got all sorts of stuff going on. So I appreciate your time. Peace. Take care of yourself. Take care of somebody else.